Hello and welcome to CAEL 202. This is the reading and speaking webinar. My name is Brandy and I will be your presenter for today. So as we're getting settled in here, I'll remind you quickly that your microphones are muted throughout this session. So if you do have a question, please put it right in the Zoom chat box. You'll see where I've already written a nice welcoming message in. I'll keep an eye on that chat box and answer questions as we go. Now, hopefully we won't lose anyone throughout the course of the webinar, but if something does go wrong, maybe the sound cuts out momentarily or a screen freezes, something to that effect, kindly let us know about it right away in the Zoom chat. If it's an issue with my system, I will fix it if I can. If it is an issue with your own computer at home, the best advice I'll give you right now is to log out of Zoom and then log right back in again. And that should hopefully reset your system and put you right back in the webinar. Hopefully we won't have any tech glitches today, but just in case we do, you've got some troubleshooting advice now. You're welcome to take notes today or screenshots, but quite honestly, I think if you simply follow along with the lesson, answer the questions that I will ask of you in the Zoom chat box, that will engage you and help you remember the information a lot better than rather just taking screenshots randomly throughout. At the end of the session, within the next 24 hours, we are going to email you anyways with some helpful study materials. There will be 3 links within this email. The first link will take you to a survey. So you're most welcome to provide feedback if you'd like to. That part's completely optional. The second link will open a study pack of materials. And these materials are going to summarize the important reading and speaking strategies that we will be discussing throughout today's session. Last but not least, there will be a third link that will take you to a previously recorded version of this CAEL 202 webinar. We keep all of our free webinars in recorded form, posted right to the YouTube channel. So if ever you wanted to go in and watch one of them when you've got time, it'll help you study at home. And of course, it doesn't cost you anything. All of these sessions are free, which we're very happy to provide for you. So I'll quickly introduce myself and we'll get off and running, as we say. So my name's Brandy, and I am an online instructor for the CAEL test. I have been teaching almost 26 years now, all said and done. And I've been helping students prepare for CAEL for about 5.5, going on 6 years. So it's really my pleasure to be here today to offer you some strategies and tips specifically about how you'll master, we hope, that second part of the CAEL test, which is all about reading and speaking. Now, before I forget, I am going to mention right now that we do have a promotion. We call this the Academic Success Bundle. So when it comes time for you to register officially for the CAEL test, if you use the code you see here on screen, it's CAEL25, you're going to receive, first of all, 25% off the registration fee for the entire test. And secondly, you're going to receive a bundle of free study materials to help you further prepare. So we've listed the materials here. You can see them on screen. You'll get 5 free practice tests, and you'll also have access for free to an online course called the CAEL Accelerate program and the CAEL Focus, which is an ebook, but it's more like a textbook series. Last but not least, there's another product called the Practice Test Plus. So all of these products, if you were to purchase them in the online bookstore, would add up to about $400 or so, but we're happy to help you study and offer this to you for a discount. So take advantage, please, if and when you will be registering for the CAEL test. So for the next close to 90 minutes or so, here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to quickly introduce what the CAEL test is all about, and then we're going to get right into the reading task format. I'll show you what your computer screens will look like when you take this test, as it is a computer test. And then we're going to do some actual practice test questions. I've got some reading passages and practice questions from a past CAEL test. And as a group, we're going to talk about strategy and answer these questions online. There's one speaking question that falls into part 2 on your CAEL test. So after we've read through the passages, you'll be asked to speak about something you've learned through that long reading passage. I do have a practice question today for the speaking component, and we're going to listen to an actual CAEL test taker provide his answer when he encountered this question on a past test. So as a group, we're going to talk about what this test taker has done very well, and we'll identify a few areas where he might want to continue to improve. And of course, I'll let you know the score that he received as well to help guide your own practice at home. At the very end of the session, I'll save just a couple of minutes to quickly introduce you to some of our free products and the online bookstore as well. So let's get started. Again, welcome if you're just joining us now. Feel free to put any questions about CAEL in that Zoom chat and I'll answer as we go. So first of all, we call this test the CAEL, and we spell it exactly this way because each letter in the word CAEL stands for another word. This is called an acronym. So the official test title is known as the Canadian Academic English Language Test. So Canadian is important, as is the word academic. This is an academic test, and as such, your vocabulary and questions are going to reflect the higher level skills that you would be required to have for success, say at the first year university standard. This is 100% Canadian designed and also 100% done on the computer. So even the speaking components are going to be completed as you sit in front of your computer workstation while you're taking the test. You're wearing a headset throughout the whole test. This is how you'll complete the listening components. But there is a microphone attached to your headset. And you're simply going to speak into that microphone and record your response when the time comes for those speaking responses. And the recordings you make are sent out to the rating team to give you a score for the speaking. So again, everything, even speaking, is done online. You would be taking the CAEL test for one of two reasons. Feel free to let me know right now in the Zoom chat, as a matter of fact, what reason brings you to the CAEL test. Most people, or I guess initially when this test was designed a long time ago, really, the test had the purpose in mind of assessing people's language proficiency to gauge whether they would be successful to study at a first-year Canadian university or college, since we do need a strong foundation of academic skills to be successful in the post-secondary world. As it stands, every major institution in Canada does accept the CAEL score for entry into their schooling systems. So that's reason number one why you would take CAEL. The second reason, and this has become a lot more common more in recent years, I would say, is if you are already in a career and pursuing one and you need a professional designation. So you could take the CAEL test and provide your score report to the employer, I'll call them, or the organization, so that they also have a sense of your proficiency level in English. We've listed one example on screen here, the CICC. This deals with immigration consultancy. There are many associations that accept the CAEL score, and there is a complete list right on the cael.ca website if you wanted to check that out as well. I do have a question already in the Zoom chat. So Ashikul is wondering, can you take the CAEL from home? And yes, I'm actually getting to that, but yes, you live in Canada. So yes, you can take this test from home, or you could take it in a testing center. The choice is yours. And I'll show you, there are 13 countries where you could take the test from home, and I'll show you that list in just a moment, but Canada is one of them. So yeah, no worries there, which is good for you to know. You'll be more comfortable maybe at home. Some of us are anyway. All right. This CAEL test is integrated as well, meaning what we're doing today, as a matter of fact, you'll be reading passages and then speaking about what you've learned. So that's one example of integrating or combining the different language skills to both understand meaning and convey meaning as well. We call this a topic-based test because all of the topics that you'll be reading about or listening to are going to come from either an arts or a science-based background. So again, I'll show you some examples upcoming. And by the time you're finished with this test, you yourselves are going to have a very realistic assessment of your readiness to progress with your goals. So what level of academic proficiency do you have? So here is that list I mentioned just earlier. If you live in one of these 13 countries pictured here, you have the option of taking this CAEL test from home. Some of us, of course, prefer that. Some people, on the other hand, might want to go into an actual testing room if there's one nearby, simply because you're going to have employees there or staff working for the test. And on the rough perchance there is a tech issue or Wi-Fi or something like that, there will be somebody in the center that can help you troubleshoot. So it really comes down to comfort. If you do choose to take this test at home, when you register, you're going to register for CAEL Online. And I know that title is a bit misleading, as the whole test, regardless of whether you're in a testing room or at home, you are taking the test online on a computer. But for registration purposes, The at-home test is called CAEL Online. So make sure that's the option you choose if you want to take the test from home, or if you're going into a testing room, it's simply just a CAEL registration. There's a huge write-up on the website at cael.ca as well about the tech stats or parameters that your own computer system at home would have to have in order to support the test. So please make sure you've got that stable Wi-Fi and your computer is strong enough to load the program, etc. So I'll leave that up to you. All right, your whole CAEL test is it takes just under 3 hours for the average person to walk through the test. You have a maximum of 3.5 hours, but it would be rare, I think, for people to need that length of time, but it's there if you need it. But do know this is sort of like a major exam. You're walking through these 5 parts listed here. That top part, CAEL, part 1 rather, is all about speaking. This is the only part of your test where you are completing one language skill, namely speaking. You're not integrating that with anything else. And when you look over to the timing section on the right-hand side, you'll see that this is by far the fastest part of the whole test. It takes up to 10 minutes to answer those 3 questions while you're speaking, and then you move on to part 2. So as we are focusing on the reading skills today, we're looking specifically at part 2 in today's session, but you'll notice, as you can see in red, that there are reading passages that fall in part 2, in part 4, and part 5. There's only one short reading passage, and we'll look at that first in part 2, but then you can count the others. There are 3 other longer reading passages that you'll need to complete throughout the test. So the reading strategies we discussed today can certainly be applied to the reading passages you will encounter in parts 4 and 5. We do have that one little speaking question about a reading passage as well in part 2, which we'll cover today. Now, if you wanted to walk through the other parts of the CAEL test in a lot of detail, feel free to register for the other free webinars that we offer. So CAEL 201, that's the name of one of our webinars. It covers just part 1 of the test, just the speaking components. We are doing part 2 today. So you've registered for CAEL 202. And then CAEL 203 would cover part 3. And then we have one final free webinar in this series, which is going to combine parts 4 and 5 together. And that's just because you're doing the same language skills in both parts. You'll be reading, you'll be listening, you'll be writing. So we'll talk about parts 4 and 5 in that one webinar. By the time you're finished taking this entire series of 4 webinars, you will have walked through in quite a bit of detail each part of the test and done some practice for each part. So it's a really great way to introduce you to CAEL as you're studying from home. Now, those topics you'll encounter from parts 2 to 5, this is where all of the reading and listening passages fall. So all of your topics are going to be either arts or science-based, and they're going to give you a good variety as well, both for interest's sake and skill set too. Looking at this list, you don't have to have any background knowledge about any of these topics. So if you're looking at the art section, for instance, these are just example subjects you might encounter on a CAEL test. You can see words like anthropology or linguistics and so on. And you might be asking yourself what these subjects even are. If we've not studied them, we might not be familiar with them. So we don't need to worry about the content yet. When you start reading through the passages on the test, provided your language skills are strong enough that you can understand what you're reading about, that's where you're going to gather the ideas necessary to answer the questions. So please don't feel like you have to run out and read all sorts of articles about these topics. That's not necessary. It's a language test. But do know you could have arts or science-based topics, and there will be a good mix all the way through the test. Now, a word about scoring. Maybe let me know in the Zoom chat if you've already got, say, if you are taking this for school, maybe you've already got a university or college picked out in Canada. So let me know about that in the Zoom chat if you'd like. But looking at this chart, you'll notice if we start at the bottom of the chart where it says band 10, we call the scoring system bands. So band 10 or band 20, if you achieve that on your CAEL test, it indicates that you're a low beginner. So more practice, I guess, would be required probably to meet your goals. And then as we climb this chart, you'll see that we're simply counting by tens. So there are no half scores in CAEL. Every single score is rounded to the nearest 10. And when we get to the very top, if you do achieve an 80 or a 90, it means that you've got expert proficiency. So these are very challenging scores to achieve, even for first language learners, because yes, we're testing our language skills, but there's a lot of critical thinking that goes into it as well, as you'll see when we get into our practice questions today. I would argue that most institutions and organizations would ask of you to achieve a band 70. And I say most because everyone's different. So depending on what school you're going to apply to or what organization, they will let you know precisely what score you need to achieve for their own requirements. So it could be a little different from somebody else's score. It all depends on your purpose. But on average, I would say most institutions look for that band 70. And when you look at what a band 70 score means, it's described as having a depth level of communication. So in other words, you already have a fairly strong foundation of skills. So you can certainly understand a lot of what you're reading or listening to, and you can make yourself understood to a point, but there might be some weaknesses or limitations that are still under development. And that makes sense. When we start a program of study at university, or if we're starting out in a career field, I don't think we're expected to know it all on day one. We do develop our skills as we continue to work or study. So starting at that band 70, and by the time you've worked in that field or studied for a length of time, presumably your scores would probably, if you were to retest, you'd probably score even better, because when we use the skills daily, that's how we build the proficiency. But just be aware, please find out your own score before you even register and take this test so that you know what you're aiming for, as it's a very personalized scoring system. Anyway, we're going to jump into the reading format now. In part 2, let's have a look here. We're doing short and long readings today, but the very first part of part 2 gives you a short reading passage. The entire short reading part takes only about 5.5 minutes, and that's because you're going to skim read over a short passage, probably connected to university life. It could be, for instance, a set of instructions from an instructor at a school to the students in class. Could be a syllabus or a course overview. So something like that. You'll read through it and you'll answer about 3 questions. So that's why the time here is quite short. After you've done that, I call that the warm-up. You're then going to move on to the long reading. And this will give you much more time, about 20 minutes this time, because you have many more questions. You've got now about 11 questions to answer. Your skills for reading will be the same, whether it's the short or long passage. It's just that the long reading passage will be more academic in scope. So imagine your professor at a university assigns you a chapter to read for homework. So you'd be reading through several paragraphs in order to understand the meaning and work through that in school the next day, that type of thing. Again, we'll look at sample questions in a minute, and you'll see the slight difference in structure there. Now, before you begin the reading parts, you'll notice as you look at this computer screen that there's no timer on the screen anywhere. So this is just your instructions so that you know exactly what's to come next. So you can see here that there will be 3 questions and about 5.5 minutes of time. So it's just a reminder, you don't have to memorize the time constraints on the test, because each computer screen is going to tell you right before you started exactly what to expect. So I think that's helpful. If you don't want to read through these instructions, or you know it already, which most of us would know as we take CAEL because you've studied, you could click the next button, and that will simply move you forward to the next screen rather than sit there and wait for the screen to display the instructions. Please be aware there's no back button, as you can see. So when you click next, you are moving forward and there's no chance to go back. Now, every computer screen does have a next button. You can see it here again in the top right-hand corner. No back button again. On screens like this, where you've got an amount of time to answer your questions, and you can see on screen there are 5 minutes showing. If you do finish a little bit early, rather than wait for the timer at the top to count backwards, you could just click the next button and move yourself forward. But if you do click next with time remaining on the clock, you don't get to carry those minutes with you to the next part. Every single reading screen is going to start with its own preset number of minutes. And that's definitely something to be aware of. At any rate, this is your short reading, and I'll quickly maybe pull out my laser pointer just to show you how you know these things in case you're new to CAEL. So this tells you you are working on part 2. It's the short reading passage. And earlier I said this is going to be a more casual, structured piece. It's likely, again, related to education. But as you can see, you do have a short paragraph to start, but there are lots of these bulleted points here. And then you can see subheadings too. We'll look a little bit more closely at these in just a moment, but you're not reading numerous paragraphs as you would in the long reading section, which I'll show you right now. Here's your long reading. So again, at the top left corner, it now says long reading for part 2. And you'll notice now that there are no bulleted points or subheadings. Instead, we simply have paragraphs to contend with. And there is going to be a scroll bar in the middle of each computer screen. So this is going to move you all the way down to the bottom so you can read the entire passage. Usually there are 8 or 9 paragraphs just to give you a good sense of the length there. And then you've got your questions always over here on the right-hand side. So we are currently on page 1 or screen 1, I suppose, on the computer. And that's why the number 1 is shaded in a gray color. So page 1, you would answer those questions, be cognizant of your time. And to answer Ashiko's question, the time on the top of the screen here for your reading passages, that's for the entire part. So in this case, for the long reading, we have 11 questions to answer. You have to finish all 11 of them within the 20 minutes of time. Going back to that short reading passage, you've only got about 3 questions to answer. You've got 5.5 minutes total to skim read over the passage and answer those 3 questions. Yeah, excellent question. I'm glad you asked me that. It's the total amount of time that you'll be looking at the reading part. So that's important to note. We've already talked about the next button, so we know how that works. When you answer all of the questions on one particular screen like this, you can see that questions number 1 and 2, somebody has made a guess or answered to the best of their ability there. You'll notice the page tab up top here turns green. And this is an important visual clue because it simply tells you that you've not missed any questions. So basically, before that clock at the top of your screen gets to 0, you want to make sure that this is what you see. All of those page tabs should be green, meaning you've not missed any questions or left anything blank. You don't yet know if they're right or not. The computer is going to score you for the reading since these are multiple choice style questions. But at the very least, you know that you've not left anything blank. And this is important. If you get an answer wrong, nothing happens. You won't be penalized. But if you leave something blank, there is absolutely no chance for any points whatsoever. I would say, honestly, if you don't know the answer, just guess. Guessing something is better than leaving it blank with no opportunity for a score. And again, you would want to see this, all passages or all page tabs green. And then if there's still time left on that clock and you're happy with your answers, then I would click next and move on to the next part of the test. So you do have a little bit of control over the speed at which you'll complete this whole test. And I think that's really, really helpful on CAEL. If you just sit and wait for that clock to get to 0, at that point, the computer moves you automatically forward anyway. But clicking next just speeds the process along if you're ready to progress. All right, we have 6 types of question formats, if you will, on the computer screen. So this is not really language-based. This is more just getting familiar with your computer skills. So I would say most of your questions are multiple choice. So you'll see a question, you'll have 4 options, and you'll notice the little bullets here or bubbles. You would click with your mouse inside the bubble that you think is correct. Sometimes, though, you're going to see 5 choices, and instead of those little round bubbles, you have squares. And when you see that, it's because more than one answer is correct, and you must have all of the answers that are correct selected to earn the 1 point for this question. Your instructions will always tell you how many answers you must select. Sometimes it'll say choose 2, sometimes it'll say choose 3, for instance, like you see here. So you get 1 point for every right answer. And since there are no half points, you have to have, in this case, all 3 answers correct to get the point there. Sometimes there will be these fill in the blank type questions, and the instructions are very clear and precise about what you're supposed to type into that white box. So this tells you to put 1 number from the passage. And when you look at that little white box below, you'll notice it's a percentage that you're looking for, a percentage of engineering failures. And it even says that this percentage is found in George Sauer's study. So you'd likely want to find George Sauer's name in the passage and find the percentage number. And then, of course, type with your keyboard into that white space. Please spell, if it asks you for 3 words, type 3 words. If it says 1 number, type 1 number, etc. but please spell the words correctly. The computer is programmed to recognize the right answer and the wrong answers. So if you make a spelling mistake, chances are the computer will not recognize it. And it would be really sad to lose an easy point when you knew the answer, but you just weren't careful enough to spell it exactly like you see it in the passage. So details are important. Please double check your spelling, that it matches precisely what you're seeing in the passage. And that will guarantee that you'll get the point for that answer. On occasion, you'll have these, they're called drop down, but it's kind of like a fill in the blank. So as you read this whole sentence from start to finish, you're going to click on that little drop down arrow and the computer will open up the 4 possible answers, multiple choice style. So you're going to click on the word, or sometimes it's a phrase, and the computer will insert that answer choice into that blank above. So the whole sentence should read, we hope, correctly from start to finish. If ever you want to change your mind, it's very easy. Just click on the answer you've inserted and the same multiple choice box will open up. So it's just a matter then of you clicking a different answer and the computer will swap them out. So I guess you could change your mind as many times as you need to, but you do have the time clock to keep in mind. So please work through these at a comfortable speed, but finish before the time gets to 0. On rare occasions, you might be asked to order different terms based on what you've learned there in the reading. So you can see there are 4 terms in those white boxes, and the instructions in the top ask you to put the oldest term at the top. The most recent one goes at the bottom. So using your mouse, you're just going to click on one of these boxes, keep the mouse button suppressed and drag the term up or down in the list. And when you're happy with where you're going to position that term, just release the mouse button. So you're going to reorder or rearrange all of these 4 terms until you get them in the order they're asked for. And last but not least, we have sometimes matching activities. So the instructions up top are asking us to match those animals. You can see 4 of them there in the white boxes with the periods in which they were domesticated. So based on what we've learned about through the reading, we would click and drag one at a time each of those 4 animal names until we're happy with where we place them. So again, you're double checking you've got this correct based on the reading passage and so on. All right, I'm going to move into reading skills now. So again, if you've got questions, let me know about them. But let's jump into the reading skills practice where you get an opportunity to actually answer some practice reading questions for CAEL. There are 3 types of questions that we must be prepared for as we work through this test. That first type is called general meaning, and these are going to be very big, broad questions with a wide scope. So for example, if you were to have a question that asks you what the main idea is of the reading passage, that's what I mean by a very big, broad scope. So you would be gathering details from larger chunks of the reading passage in order to answer questions like that. It would never come from just a single word or 1 or 2 sentences. Usually it's a bigger chunk. Those specific information questions, though, this is the second type. These ones are a lot easier because the question is going to focus in on a very precise detail. I always refer to the 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, or why of the situation. So maybe the question is asking you a when type detail, something about time. So when your eyes know exactly what word to look for through the passage, we call that scanning for information. Usually you can find that word or a few words very quickly and quite easily. So it takes less time for most people to answer these specific information questions. And when we know what to look for, again, it makes it a little bit easier. That third type, though, at the bottom of this list is called inference questions. And these ones are the most challenging for most people. And that's because the answer choices here are not stated directly in the passage. So instead, we have to fully understand what we've just been reading about. And then looking at your answer choices, you're going to use logic and reasoning to choose the answer that makes the most sense. This is what we mean when we say draw conclusions or make assumptions based on what you're reading. So yes, we need to have strong language skills to answer all 3 of these types of questions, but for inference type questions especially, higher level critical thinking skills are necessary. So we'll look at that as we go. I've got practice questions for each type, by the way. So let's get underway with that now. So I'm showing you, we're back to that same short reading screen that we looked at earlier. Again, we know it's the short reading passage because of this. On the real test, you're going to start with 5.5 minutes. Be aware of that. This is a screenshot, so I realize it says 5 minutes, but this would start at 5.5 minutes on the official test the moment you land on this computer screen. And then this clock is going to count backwards. So when it gets to 0, we're hoping you've answered the 3 questions. You've got 2 questions on page 1. And when you're ready to answer the final question, you're going to click on page 2 and you would see that 3rd question here. Before we look at the questions, though, what I would advise you do, and this is your first reading strategy that we're going to try right now, I would do a quick skim read over of this passage. So only 5.5 minutes, not a lot of time, but at the very least, could you skim read right now, please, this very first paragraph? You're letting your eyes quickly go, of course, left to right in English over the screen here, and you're looking just for the key words. Don't read slowly and carefully and leisurely. I just want to know overall, what is this reading passage all about? And normally we get that from the introduction up top. Can you skim that first paragraph right now, please? And in the Zoom chat, let me know what this topic is. Even if you want to pull out one word, let's just say from that first paragraph, I think that would be fine for practice. I'll give you 10 seconds because that's how long it should take to do this. Okay, that's 10 seconds. So that should be enough to recognize that this looks like it's written by a teacher because it's all about lab reports. So these are the keywords that I noticed. So if you asked me in general terms what I'm looking at, I'd say, oh, this is a set of instructions or assignment from a teacher to their students all about how to complete a lab report. And I see now in the Zoom chat that some of you have found already some specific details. So as I skimmed as well, I also noticed we get due dates and we get like a day of the week, we get a time, we get how they're to be submitted. So it's not a matter of memorizing these precise details. It's just a matter of recognizing what types of details are included here, because if we get a question over here about that later, we're going to know to come back to that part of the passage and read a bit more carefully to find the answer. So finding these time strategies is going to help you on the test. But again, it's about lab reports and we have some information about due dates and so on. After we've skimmed that, and that would have taken honestly 10 seconds, should be about the length of time, we then notice all these bulleted points here. So all I would do, I wouldn't read the text yet. I'll wait until the questions ask me what to look for. But in the meantime, I can at least look at the subtitles. So here we get information about how to form the title. There's an introduction piece, something about materials, the method of the experiment, I guess, the results, a discussion, and a conclusion. So at least I know roughly what the main ideas are. So I feel like we're in a pretty good position now to go on to the questions. So that skim reading in the short passage, you would not want to spend any more than 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the most. But then that would give you about 5 minutes left to answer 3 questions, which is definitely an achievable goal. But try to plan out your own time frame as you're practicing and then performing on the actual test. We are going to answer one question only for this short reading passage, and we're going to do number 1. I will let you know that the questions on the test usually follow the same order as the information presented in the wepassage. So chances are the answer to this question will be found towards the top of the passage. Not always, but often. So we'll keep that in the back of our mind. But have a look at your question first. It says, what is true of lab reports for this class? So the moment we see this, what is true, we know that this is not an inference question. What we know, based on the way the question is worded, is that one of these 4 answer choices is going to be located somewhere within this reading passage. And it's simply a matter of us trying to match the vocabulary. So if you look at answer choice A, it says they have an open format. Open format just means there aren't any rules about how you're going to structure. You can choose your own structure and format for the whole lab report. Choice B says they should be physically handed in. Choice C says they follow APA citation style. And D says they require reading about the topic. So one of these 4 answers, and only one, is going to be mentioned somewhere in the passage. So now it's a matter of us trying to figure out where to look. You're not going to have time to read slowly and carefully for every single question. So an efficient test taker would put a plan into action, looking at those subtitles where the bulleted points are. Perhaps there's a subtitle that you think would be a very good spot to start with your search. And again, because this is question 1, my intuition's telling me the answer is probably towards the top. So I'm going to give you approximately 30 seconds starting now to see if you can answer this question on your own, and then I'll help you out with it. Let me know in the Zoom chat if you think you know the answer before those 30 seconds is up. Okay, some answers are already coming in, which I appreciate. I'm going to give you another 10 seconds, and then I'm going to give you a hint, and we'll go from there. Okay, that was about 30 seconds. Again, you could have more time if you needed it, but I'm trying to get us on a time plan, if you will. So the answer is actually located within the section under the introduction. And I'll sort of walk you through my approach, the way maybe we could look at this. We already know from the very first paragraph that this is a lab report set of instructions, and we have information about due dates and so on. And just like when I say what is true about lab reports, to me, looking at the introduction first is probably a good starting point. So that's likely where I would have read anyways. And I can already see some of you are changing your answers. Yeah, exactly. I will confirm then that choice D is indeed the correct answer. And some of you have answered that in the Zoom chat. When you look at the introduction section, and I've just underlined that phrase for you, it says, do your research. And when you look back to the answer choices, choice D doesn't use the exact word research, but it asks students to read about the topic. So this is a perfect example of paraphrasing information. When we read about a topic, it's the same as researching that topic. So especially on CAEL, being an academic test, chances are you're not going to be so lucky as to find the exact words the same in the passage as they are stated in the questions and answers. So instead, if we've got a fairly widely developed vocabulary and we can easily match up these synonyms and paraphrased ideas, that's going to help us immensely as we work through this whole test. So this is exactly how we know that choice D is the right answer. When we were asked what's true about lab reports, well, there's your proof. Students have been told that they're going to be doing research, so we know they have to read about the topic. So most of us might just click that answer and move on to question 2. I'm going to present a different strategy now, though. On some questions, you might not be 100% certain what the right answer is. You might be guessing, but if you've got time on the test, it might be wise to look at the other answers that you're not selecting. If you can rule them out or eliminate them from consideration, and you're left with, say, one answer remaining, then that's a reassurance to you that that one answer remaining is correct. So if you look at choice A, we didn't select that. It says they have an open format. So talking about the format and how students are going to structure a piece or a lab report, when I look back to the reading passage, I would probably look at the method. The method means how we're going to structure and create this report. And all the details under the method section are actually quite strict and rigid. We have to use past tense verbs, for instance. We're told exactly what type of information we have to include and what not to include. So exclude extra or extraneous information. In other words, the teacher doesn't want us to list how many times we've washed our hands and so on. So there are quite a few rules about what we should and should not be doing to structure this particular report. So there's no way that it has an open format. It's the opposite of open. It's quite structured or quite rigid. So we can rule that one out. Choice B says they should be physically handed in. And I think this was the easiest. Remember when I asked you earlier to skim read over that first paragraph? Some of us hopefully noticed that we were asked to electronically submit our lab reports. We're not supposed to hand them in paper copy. So that was an easy one to rule out. Choice C talks about the citation style. Citations are when you are referencing a resource. So when you look through the entire passage here, again, looking at we've already looked at the materials, methods, probably results, right? because that's what a citation is all about. It's showing where I got my source information. So I would probably look under results. And sure enough, I see the citation that we're supposed to use. This one says American Chemical Society Style Guide, which is not at all APA. And on closer examination, APA does not appear anywhere in this passage. So there's absolutely no way choice C could be the correct answer. So by eliminating those three and proving that they're wrong, we're only left with choice D anyways. So if you had any doubt at all whether you were right or not selecting D, now you can be absolutely confident that D is the correct answer. So eliminating other answers is a pretty good strategy when you're stuck on a question and you're truly not sure. Anyway, let's wrap up what we were doing. This was a very specific information question because we are looking for one detail and it had to be quite precise, coming from just a very small section of the text. So we recognize that first, right? Remember, I showed you in the question, what is true about? So when we see that, we're already on the right track, knowing, I'm going to find one of these answer choices somewhere in the text and I know what to look for. So we talked about perhaps which section might contain that information. And the introduction seemed like a good place to start, given that it's introducing us to the passage, but also because this was question 1 and the introduction part came towards the top. So oftentimes we will follow the order of the passage when we're answering questions. We skim read until we found the specific details that matched one of those answer choices. In this case, it was do your research and require reading. So we made that connection and of course then looked and found the answer in choice D. So that's a summary of how we're going to locate details to answer these specific type information questions. These ones, again, tend to be the easiest for most of us. So with that practice under our belts, let's move on to a long reading passage now. Again, I'm going to show you with my laser pointer just to make sure we all know. Long reading, your clock on the real test will start with 20 minutes showing and count backwards from there. We're only going to look right now at these 2 paragraphs. On the real test, remember, you would scroll down here and you'd be able to read the whole passage because we do have 5 pages of questions to get through, 11 questions in total. Right now, we're simply on page 1 and we can only see the first 2 questions. So before we even look here, just like last time, I would encourage you to skim read first. So we know what this passage is about. I would suggest that we look just at the first sentence of each paragraph because the first sentence usually gives you the main idea or topic of that paragraph. So when we look here, as my eyes quickly go over the words in this very first sentence, I'm noticing we're talking about engineering. I see that we have had some accomplishments with some examples, but then I also see that there have been some failures and tragedies. So from that first sentence alone, as I pick out these keywords that my eyes are landing on, I recognize this is a science-based package. It's about engineering, or passage rather, all about engineering, and we can expect probably to focus on these failures. That's all I need to know for now. And then coming down here to the second paragraph, sure enough, it talks about what causes the engineering failures. And I presume this paragraph will give examples of failures and so on. So I would take in 20 minutes, you can afford 30 seconds, maybe even 40 seconds to read over the first sentence of each paragraph. Remember, you'd navigate down and do the other paragraphs too. But for right now, I think we've got enough on this screen just for practice sake. And we're going to answer this first question again. So the question reads, Professor Henry Petrosky is likely to be teaching which one of the following engineering courses? And you can see a list of different types of engineering courses in the answer choices. So looking at the question alone, I think there are maybe 2 words there that are the most helpful. These are the 2 keywords that we're going to scan through the passage on the left to try to find. Can I ask one of you watching right now, which words are you going to locate in the text as your starting point, where you hope to see details that will give you the answer? Again, just look back at the question. And remember, your keywords, usually, they always fall into those 5 W's. It'll either be a who, what, where, when, or why. So when you look at this question, I'm hoping it jumps out at you right away. You notice this is a who type question. The entire question focuses on this Professor Henry Petrosky. And names are actually very easy to scan and spot in a text quickly. That's because names always start with capital letters. So when we let our eyes start at the top of this passage on the left, and just let your eyes quickly move over the words on screen until you find Professor Henry Petrosky's name. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to do that, and then I'm going to circle the name for you. There it is. So again, hopefully 5 seconds is a good length of time if you're looking in that paragraph. Professor Henry Petrosky. So chances are, since we found his name there, our answer is likely going to be found in this first paragraph, or at least we're hoping. Again, this is question 1. So chances are the details will come from the top part of this passage. The next step, even before I look at the passage, is I want to know what type of question this is. So question 1 says, Professor Henry Petrosky is likely to be teaching which one of these courses. When you see the word likely, you know 100% without a doubt that this is an inference question. For sure, for sure. So what that means then is within this passage, you are not going to have the details given to you. At no point is the passage going to say, Petrosky teaches material engineering, for example. So instead, what we want to do is, and I'll make this a bit bigger so you're not straining your eyes, we want to read the part of the paragraph, and I put a red box around it to help you out. Read all about Petrosky, find out what he's done, and with that information we've learned about, we can then turn our attention to those answer choices and hopefully make an educated guess as to which of those courses is probably the one he's teaching. That's what inference skills are all about. I already see some answers coming into Zoom chat, which is great. I'm going to give you another, say, 20 seconds of quiet time. I'll stop talking so you can focus. Read through that paragraph and let me know what you think the answer is. Okay, that was about 20 seconds. You could take more if you need it on the actual test, but I already see some answers in Zoom chat. And so far, we've selected choice C, which is engineering ethics, as the course that he's probably teaching. You would be absolutely correct. That is indeed the right answer. And here's how we know. So looking back to the passage, one of the first things I noticed, and I hope you noticed too, is that Petrosky has written a book. And the name of that book is To Engineer is Human. I've underlined that detail for you. Notice how the letters, or the words rather, and the title of that book are italicized, meaning they're a little bit squiggly on screen. And in a passage, when the font is different, your eyes are naturally drawn there. So this is one way of figuring out that this is probably an important detail. Otherwise, why would it be differentiated in the text? So to engineer is human. And then I guess the rest of that title is the role of failure in successful designs. And right below that, we get a brief summary of what this book is discussing. And it's all about how engineering failures are happening. And then towards the bottom of this paragraph, we learn that we are looking at this book to learn why these disasters occur and hopefully to prevent them from happening again, I suppose. And sure enough, the very last detail here tells us that even professionals in the field, known as forensic engineers, forensics come in and they use clues to figure out why these disasters are happening. So if we're using Petrosky's book to determine the cause, to hopefully avoid having that disaster happening again, when you look back over here at your 4 choices, the one that makes the most sense discusses ethics. And ethics, in very simple terms, ethics would almost be like a study between right and wrong. That's one very simplified way to look at this. And if you understand that broad definition, you can apply that easily to the role of this book. Right and wrong, meaning, disasters have occurred. How can we correct those mistakes so they don't continue to happen? So this is the most logical assumption to make, which is why it's the right answer. So again, inference questions can be extra challenging simply because you are relying on logic and reasoning. The answers are not provided directly in the passage. Step 1 when dealing with these types of questions is to, first of all, identify it is an inference question. So the word in the question that says likely, which course would Petrosky likely teach? Likely is the signal word that reminded us right away, we're not going to see those 4 answer choices in the passage. So let's not waste our time looking for them because they're not going to be there. That's step 1. once we located that part in the passage about Petrosky and read more about him and what he's done, in this case, it's the book he's written and what that book is all about, we can start to make these conclusions or assumptions between what we're reading and the answer choices there. Some of you may have wanted to eliminate the other answers once again, like we did in our first practice today. Or in this case, it looks like a lot of you knew the answer right away. So that's fine as well. Either would work. But if you didn't know it was the ethics, you might have wanted to consider those other three to eliminate them, to reassure yourself that you're on the right track. But well done. Inference questions can be very tricky. So that was a great practice to get accomplished today. And we are going to finish up with one final practice question on the long reading. And this one, of course, will be our general meaning question, since we haven't yet done one. So looking at the passage first, this is a continuation of the same passage, all about the engineering failures. So I know I've got part of a paragraph here, and then you can see a paragraph here. This is talking about communication issues between the software systems that can lead to disasters. So that's helpful. This sets up the main idea of all of this. And then down here, once again, we're taught, oh, look at this, engineering ethics. That word came much further down in the passage, but it should jog your memory. You might go back to that question we just answered and say, yes, I chose ethics. So that looks like I'm on the right track. So engineering ethics, and it talks about what the discipline is all about, and it's reminding us about how to be safe and so on. So again, just looking at the first sentence of each paragraph, if you haven't already done so, is going to help you focus on where you're going to find the information. So we are going to answer this time question number 9. If you look up top, you'll notice this is page number 4. So there's one last page with 2 other questions if we were to click on page 5. But question number 9 is the one we'll do right now. And this one says, according to the reading, what was the most important lesson from the Mars Climate Orbiter disaster? So once again, when you have a question like this, it's your job as the reader to pull out the keywords that you're going to try to find in the passage first. So if you asked me what the most important part of this entire question is going to be, I would tell you the Mars Climate Orbiter. This is the name of something. Maybe it's a device of sorts that's used in engineering. Mars is a planet in the sky, that much we know. So chances are we're going to find these precise words because it looks like the name. I noticed the capital letters M, C, and O. So we're going to go back into the passage. We're going to try to find that and carry on from there. So I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to find Mars Climate Orbiter, or MCO. It shouldn't take too long because all of these words are capitalized. So it's like a gift. When you're scanning for names, they usually jump off the page just like this one does. There it is right there. Mars Climate Orbiter. And in brackets, I can see MCO. So that all checks out. We know what we're talking about. So first things first, the question says, according to the reading. So we know this is not an inference question. That's a relief. That would be harder maybe. So we're going to learn by reading through this paragraph all about this Mars Climate Orbiter. We're going to learn what it is, what happened to it, and then we should be able to answer this question. So I see some answers already coming into the Zoom chat, which is wonderful. I'm going to give you now 30 seconds to read that part of the paragraph about the Mars Climate Orbiter to yourself and see if you can select an answer. So your 30 seconds starts now. Okay, that was 30 seconds, and I'm hoping that's enough time to at least understand what this Mars Climate Orbiter is all about. So I'm just going to underline a sentence more or less in the middle of this chunk of the text. So this Mars Climate Orbiter, it says here, the orbital insertion of this MCO was miscalculated. So first of all, orbital insertion, those are very high level academic words. But maybe we can break it down and look at the word orbit. If you know anything about space and astronomy, the orbit is the direction of the planets around the sun, right? Insertion or insert in my mind would mean this Mars Climate Orbiter, which I'm thinking of almost like a satellite device in its own way, was inserted up into orbit in outer space. So it looks like the angle of insertion was miscalculated. So they got it wrong. They got the angle wrong. And the reason they got the angle wrong is because there was a confusion of the two measurement systems. So one measurement system was using pound seconds. The other measurement system was done in Newton seconds. So the measurement themselves were correct. The confusion lay, though, is because they used two different measurements to put this MCO into outer space. And if you continue to read the rest of that little paragraph, we learn that as a result of this mistake, this entire MCO disintegrated. That means it exploded and was no more. So when you look back to the question here and it says, according to the reading, what was the most important lesson from the Mars Climate Orbiter disaster? And when you look at those four answer choices, the one that makes the most sense is choice B. And I'm happy to see some of you chose that. B says consistent measurement units should be maintained. And that makes complete sense because, again, this disaster occurred not because the calculations were wrong, but because the two different units were used. So in other words, we should be using the same units going forward to avoid these disasters. And that's what we mean when we say consistent measurement units, use the same measurement units. So I guess in this case, that either both or all units would have to be pound seconds, or all units would have to be Newton seconds. If only they'd have done that, this orbiter probably would not have blown up. So that's why this one is the right answer. And I will point out the answer choice right below that, choice C. Sometimes we get people selecting that answer. And I can almost see why, because the language here says more powerful calculations should be implemented. And when we see that word calculations, a lot of us just assume it's got to be the right answer, because in the text, it's talking about these miscalculations. But even though the language matches very closely, the idea is not correct. Choice C says you need more powerful calculations, and that's not at all the case. The passage says, no, the calculations themselves were fine. It was the confusion between the different units. So sometimes it's a matter of, yes, matching vocab, but second, you have to understand what the information is telling you and make the best choice. At any rate, for these general meaning questions, we want to identify it as such from the question. And when you look back to the question where it says, according to the reading, so that was one way we could tell that we were going to be not making an inference. We're looking for information right there. We then want to scan through until we find the part of the passage that gives us details that are helpful. In this case, we recognize that Mars Climate Orbiter is the whole focus of the question. So it made sense to find that first. And that was relatively easy and quick, I think. Then we had to read the rest of that paragraph. So this is typical of a general meaning. We have to read several sentences often to gather enough relevant information so it all makes sense. So we needed to know what this orbiter was, how it was put into space, and then what happened. It blew up. So when we understood that, we were then able to look at those four answer choices and select the best answer. In this case, again, you might have to eliminate other answers if you're not really sure, but there's always one best answer. And it looks like some of you got that before we even discussed it. So good for you. So let's sum up our reading strategies. We've now just looked at all three types of questions. We did a specific information, an inference, and a general meaning type question. But our reading strategies are the same throughout, regardless of the type of question in a way. So I always suggest that we can preview the page first. It's nice to know how long your passage is. If you've got any headings or bulleted points or subheadings, like we saw in that short reading passage, those are incredibly useful to help you know which each part of the text will be about. Look at your timer right away so you know how much time there is to answer the questions, and just remind yourself how many questions there are. The object is to finish before time is up. So have a bit of a time management plan. And that previewing stage, by the way, doesn't take long. Maybe it takes 5 or 6 seconds just to glance at the screen and come up or understand how it's structured, I guess. Skimming takes a bit longer, and that's the stage that we did where we looked at just the first sentence in each paragraph. We wanted to gather the main ideas so that we knew what each paragraph is going to discuss. Or in the case of the short reading, the bulleted points, we just looked at the subtitles. So we knew what that part was going to talk about. The third thing we did was to scan for information. So identifying those key details from your question. So that last one, Mars climate orbiter, recognizing that as a key detail and finding it in the text is going to focus us on where we need to look for more details. And last but not least, if there is a vocabulary word that you need to understand because it somehow is going to help you answer the question properly, if you don't know what that word means, the best thing you can do on the test is to read the sentence above and below and within where that new word is. And usually you'll understand most words there. So base your understanding on the words you do know and try to take a guess as to the meaning of that new word. And you would only do this if you absolutely needed the meaning for that particular question and answer. All right, let's cap it off with just a little bit more reading practice. You've got one paragraph only visible on screen to the left. Can I give you approximately 15 seconds to skim? Let me know in the Zoom chat what this whole paragraph is about. What is the topic? One word will do it, I think. Okay, so if we use the idea that the topic of each paragraph is generally introduced in the opening sentence, hopefully you notice that this is all about instructions about this presentation in class. And as you were reading this over, you probably noticed that the word presentation is used a few times throughout this passage. So when you see repetition like that, you know that that word has to be important somehow. So yes, this is all, I presume, from a teacher giving instructions to the class on what she'd like them to do for their in-class presentation. We're going to answer the 3 questions. There are 3 questions. We'll look at them on the right-hand side here. The first one is a fill in the blank. So it says, complete this sentence with 3 words from the text. So I'll read out loud the sentence starter, and then I'd like you to try to find those exact 3 words right from the paragraph and let me know in the Zoom chat. It says, the teacher expects the speakers to have decided on their subjects blank. So you're going to find 3 words exactly from the passage. And then the idea continues. Otherwise, the speaker may be too late to prepare. Expects the speakers to have decided on their subjects. Otherwise, they might be too late. This seems to deal with sort of like a deadline, if that's helpful to you at all. That's how I'm reading this. But take a moment, try to match some of the words from that sentence on the right to synonyms or paraphrased ideas in the passage on the left. I'm curious to see if you can find 3 words exactly that will do it. Remember, this is question 1. Chances are details will come closer to the top. And sure enough, they do. Have you found it yet? I'll give you about 10 seconds more and then I'll underline it for you and show you where you can look. All right, here is where the answer comes. So the sentence in the text I've underlined says, I expect you to have chosen a topic, and then there's the answer, by next Friday. So the reason why that sentence is really critical here is when we look over here, the teacher expects the speakers. So that word expect actually was a direct word for word match. That doesn't happen very often in CAEL, but we're lucky it did here. Because when you see that, I expect, that means the teacher expects. So I assumed I was looking at the right spot. And then this has to have decided on their subjects. Well, a topic is more or less the same as a subject. So I assumed all of this was correct. And there are my 3 words, by next Friday. So we insert those in the blank. And then it says, otherwise, the speaker may be too late to prepare. So the whole sentence now makes sense from start to finish if we insert those 3 words. Notice all we did was copy them exactly as they appeared in the passage. We've got our capital letter on the word Friday. We've got those 3 words in a row. Spelling is great. And that's what we need to do if we would like the point for that answer. Anyway, let's move on to question 2. Why should the students properly prepare for their presentation? I'll leave that sit with you. I'll give you about 30 seconds and then we'll move on. Here come some guesses. Okay, looks like A is leading the votes here right now. So I'll let you know, first of all, that yes, you're correct. And we're even getting some evidence as to why that's correct. This is wonderful. So I think it was Ashikul is suggesting from the passage, and again, I've underlined that detail for us to look at. The passage reads, as this presentation accounts for 25% of your grade. And that's the detail Ashikul was using to choose choice A. And that's exactly how I did it. I noticed in the question alone, it was talking about that presentation, which is what the whole topic is. And I noticed the word presentation again right here, where I've underlined. And when I saw that the presentation is worth 25%, and I looked back at the way choice A was worded, I decided that 25%, that is a huge amount or a significant amount of the grade for this whole course, given that it's just one assignment. So that's why choice A makes the most sense. When you look at choice B, where it says they'll be graded on their preparation, nope. Choice B talks about preparation, not presentation. And that's a very common mistake to make. Sometimes we're reading quickly and we're in a rush and we don't notice. But choice B has nothing to do with the topic. We're not dealing with preparation. We're talking about presentation. Choice C says they will not be allowed to present. Well, nothing here says they can't present. And choice D says it can be done instead of the question and answer period. And that's not the case either. There is no Q&A mentioned anywhere in the passage. So choice A is definitely the logical choice here. It makes the most sense, and we backed it up with evidence. Let's do our favorite inference type questions here now. Last one. This is probably the hardest. We'll see. This one says, which of these statements could be true? Notice the language, could be true. That tells us this is an inference about the teacher based on the information we're reading. So we've read the whole paragraph through. It's up to you now to decide which statement best describes this teacher. Use logic, use reasoning, and let me know what you think in the Zoom chat. How great are your reasoning skills is the question. Okay, some guesses are coming in slowly but surely. Yeah, and challenge or the inference ones I think are the most challenging. So I'm not surprised this one takes a bit more thinking. Can we maybe, let's just walk through the choices one by one here. Choice A says the teacher does not care what subject is used, and that doesn't make any sense at all. She says a list of topics will be posted on the course website. And then she wants the students to let her know which topic they're doing. So this doesn't make any sense at all. Can't be choice A. She certainly cares a great deal about the subject the students will present on. Choice B says the teacher thinks students are new to doing presentations. Now, there's nothing here that says, as this is your first presentation, etc. All the teacher says to start is you are required to give this presentation in course. I expect you to have done all of these things. When the teacher has such lofty expectations, and this is a parameter of the course, I don't think she's considering that they're new to doing presentations at all. There's nothing really there leading me to suspect probably the teacher thinks they're new. The teacher doesn't indicate that one way or the other. So I don't think it's B, but let's just double check down here and see if there's something better to select. Choice C says the teacher highly values organization. Let's just think about that for a second. If you are an organized teacher, how would you present your instructions to the course? If it were me, and I am an English teacher, so I can relate, you probably have been a student before, so you can relate as well. Wouldn't the teacher who is organized give you the list of topics to select between, give you the due date for when you have to select that particular topic, let her know which topic you're doing, offer you to schedule an appointment with her if you need to discuss, give you the value of the presentation as well, and tell you precisely what the objective is. There's about 5 details I've just listed out for you that all show very strong examples of what an organized person would do. I think she does indeed highly value organization. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so direct about, percentages and due dates and confirmations, etc. So I think C is definitely logical here. It looks to me like it's the right answer. Let's just double check here. This one says the teacher believes testing is more important than presentations. Absolutely not. Testing isn't even mentioned here. The whole topic is all about presentations. So really, B and C would be the top contenders. A and D are definitely not true. If you had to choose between B and C, there's so much more evidence to support that C is the best choice. We've got 5 concrete pieces of evidence or actions done by the teacher to really show that she's organized, and nothing definitive there suggesting that she thinks students are new to presentations. So C would be the best choice and indeed the right choice for this particular question, and on you would go. So some great practice there for some inference skills. Anyway, let us finish off today with the speaking on the long reading question. So imagine at this point in your test, as you've worked through part 2, you already would have finished your short reading passage and answered those 3 questions. You already now would have finished that long reading passage and answered 11 questions. So let's pretend we've already done that. And then you get to the speaking question. And the speaking question is only ever going to be about the long reading passage. You're never going to have to think about the short reading ever again, which is nice. So just that long reading passage that you've just finished. And we were talking all about those engineering disasters, if you go back to Henry Petrosky. So that would be the speaking question, something related to that. When you record your answer into your microphone at the test in front of your computer, those recordings are sent out to the rating team. There are multiple raters, and they're going to listen to your response and give you a score, remember a band level, based on your performance or based on the strengths and weaknesses that you demonstrate across all 5 of these particular categories that you see on screen. So that first one's all about the delivery skills. And this speaks directly to speech presentation. So of course, as we're speaking, we want to speak loudly enough to be heard. So please just speak at a regular volume into your microphone. Watch your speed. You want to be comfortable, but we don't want to speak too fast or too slow. It should be fairly natural. And I'd say pronunciation is key here. We have to make sure that we are pronouncing the words clearly. Otherwise, it's hard to understand the ideas. So those are your foundational speech skills, but we also want to fine-tune the rhythm and intonation. We try our very best to move the speech forward without pausing for too long or without self-correcting or interjecting as much as we can. We want this to be natural and flow well as we speak. That second category down is all about your language use, how accurate you're using the language. Remember, this is an academic test. We do not want to use idioms or slang or even common words to the best of our ability. The more precise word choice and the better variety of words you can demonstrate that are accurate, that convey the right meaning, the better you'll be for your score here. So vocabulary word choice itself is important, but so too are the grammar and sentence structure. The rating team only listens to your recording, true. They don't have a transcript, but they can still tell as you're speaking if you're using more complex sentence structures, and again, showing a good variety. These skills will definitely support a stronger score. Joining or connecting ideas together as well with transitions and conjunctions. These are the joining words. That's going to also help the flow of the piece. Over to the right-hand side here, your content. Your content, of course, is important. Usually in the beginning, you might give one sentence of an introduction to the general topic. In this case, we might say something about engineering disasters, since that's what the whole passage was about. But then you're going to answer the question directly from the test. And throughout the 2 minutes of talking time here, you're going to present several main ideas. And for each main idea, you're going to have some supporting details or specific examples that you're going to take directly from the reading passage in order to back them up. Hopefully at the end of this response, you're going to have time to offer a concluding statement. And a conclusion doesn't have to be too complex, but generally you can re-emphasize what your main idea was. Try to use different language so you're not repeating your topic sentence. Or sometimes too, you can make a prediction if it makes sense to do so for the question, leaving the listener with an idea to ponder or to continue to think about after you're done delivering your answer is an effective and interesting way to close off a response. The fourth category is task fulfillment, and you've got 2 things to consider here. First of all, time. It's a 2-minute question, so you want to get close to 2 minutes. you don't have to be exactly 2 minutes. That would be pretty impossible for most of us to do. But if you finish up even in, say, 1 minute and 50 seconds, and you've given a very full and complete answer, then that's fine. Don't stress about exact time, but you definitely want to use as much of the 2 minutes as you can to showcase your strengths. And the other part, of course, is to answer the full question. And when I show you the practice question on the next screen, you're going to notice there are 2 parts to the question. And this is very common in CAEL. So please make sure you address both parts. And frankly, it's easier to do so because to fill 2 minutes, it's helpful to have 2 different main ideas to talk about and support. It's going to help you fill the talking time better anyway. Last but not least, just for this particular question, you're going to be assessed on 3 additional factors, which are all related to speaking on this particular long reading passage. So you must use information from that long reading passage as you are supporting your answers and your idea. You also must use your own vocabulary and language when you're speaking about your ideas. Try not to read just right off the computer screen. That's never the best way to go. Paraphrasing and using synonyms would be much, much better for sure. So those first 4 categories are used for all 5 of your speaking responses on CAEL. This last category, speaking on the long reading, only applies to part 2, which is the question I'm going to show you now. So all 5 of these parts of the checklist we'll look at. So I'm going to play for you a man's answer. He had this exact question when he took his CAEL test at some point in the past. So this is what your computer screen looks like. You'll notice the question in the top right there. It says, why do engineering disasters happen? And what are the causes of errors? So this is based on that Petrosky passage about these engineering disasters. So the computer screen will give you 2 different tabs here. We are currently on the instructions tab, which is why it's been bolded in white, as in it's been selected. And right beneath the instructions tab, you're going to see the exact same information that we just discussed in that Rader's checklist. It's a reminder that you can refer back to the reading passage up top. You're going to be scored based on your content, your language, and your source material. So on the real test, you're going to have 60 seconds to prepare some ideas, and then you'll speak for 2 minutes following that. I don't think you'll need to actually read these bulleted points on the real test. These are our skills and instructions that we're learning about now as we study. So you're going to know this before you enter the testing room. But what you will want to use your preparation time on is you would want to click on this reading passage tab here, and it's going to pull up the exact same reading passage that you've just finished looking through. You've just finished answering about 11 questions. So this content is really fresh in your mind. So by having this on screen, even as you're talking, and using your 60 seconds of prep time to pull ideas out to answer the question, that is definitely the most effective way to go. You'll notice there's a preparation time clock in the middle of the screen to the right. So that's going to start with 60 seconds and count back. And the moment that clock gets to 0, you'll hear an automated voice say through the headset, start speaking now. And when it's time to speak, instead of the preparation time clock, you're going to see this little recording visual on screen anyway. At any rate, we're back on the instructions tab. Just so you know, you can click back and forth between instructions and reading passage. I've shown you where the big prep and recording clocks are, but you'll always see that information up top in the right-hand side here as well. The question we've already read together, but as an emphasis, remember there are 2 parts. So we're going to have to talk about why these disasters happen first, and we'll have to pull out some examples of some of these disasters mentioned in the reading passage. And then after we've done that, we will get into what caused these disasters to occur. Again, this is what you'll see when you're speaking. By the way, 2 things. The word recording tells you that your microphone is live. So anything you say out loud at that point in time will be included in part of your answer. And that's really important to know. That little blue bar beneath the word recording is going to move all the way over to the right-hand side of the screen on the real test. Right now, I'm showing you a screenshot. I realize it's sedentary, but on the real test, it moves, and it's the timer. So 2 minutes it will take for that blue bar to reach the end. And since you're looking at that while you're speaking into the mic, you'll know when it's time to wrap up your answer and finish off. And the only other difference on the real test from what you see here is that little gray bar on top of the microphone icon. It's going to bounce up and down gently as you're speaking into the microphone. And that will reassure you that the mic is working and is clearly recording your voice. So I thought I'd mention that as a helpful confidence boost when you take this test, whether from your home computer or in the testing room. So I've touched on your prep time, but let's quickly review. During the 60 seconds, you'll read your question and figure out what you're going to talk about. And this is where you'll look through that reading passage to find the main ideas. I would encourage you to write them down as you see them. Keep your notes really short. You're not going to have time to write sentences, but any examples of disasters from engineering that the passage mentions, I would be noting those down so you'll know to talk about them when the time comes. Even in your notes, please use your own vocabulary so that you're not repeating word for word what's on the screen in front of you. And you can start to think about how you'll open. Sometimes having a strong opening statement is going to help your response take off. So let's look at how we might take notes for this particular question. So we already know that we have to talk about a why and a what here. And because we have two parts to the question, I think maybe for note taking, it might be helpful to create a 2-column chart like you see here. So I'm just going to demonstrate looking at this first paragraph of the reading passage. We've had a quick look at it, but if this were my 60 seconds of prep time, I would just start skim reading over. And as I found information and details that answered one of these 2 test questions, I would jot them down. So you can see from the passage in yellow there, it says violation of codes of practice. In my own vocabulary, I might discuss how professionals are not following industry rules as well as they should, and disasters are therefore occurring. So it's a matter of just jotting down enough keywords that you're able to take those notes that you've made and change them up into full sentences when it comes time to speak. So miscommunication is another reason. So maybe we'll say poor communication just to try to change the wording a little bit. Extreme weather conditions during construction and so on. Bad weather while building, and on it goes. So you've only got the 60 seconds. There are ideas too for causes. So human factors was mentioned. We have 3 other details. Okay, now you'll receive examples of the notes in your study pack today after this session's finished. I will comment now that these notes are a little bit lengthy to show you the exact words, so that when you look back, you'll understand more fully what these ideas are and how they match the passage. In your 60 seconds, chances are you're going to find your own short forms to condense the words so you have time. Like poor communication, I would probably just write down poor COM period. And I would remember that means communication. So please find your own shorthand or short form when you're note taking, as I doubt you'll have time to write full words like you see here. But again, this is an example just to guide how the information from the passage is being converted into different language, just so you're aware. Part of your prep too, if you want to think about how you're going to start, you won't have time to write this down, but I'll demonstrate a very high level opening. So I might, in 5 seconds before my microphone turns on, I might focus my attention on the top few sentences of this whole passage, since I'm supposed to introduce it anyway. And as my eyes glance over the beginning part, I notice we're talking about feats or accomplishments of engineering. And we're also talking about tragedies too. So just with that in mind, as you start to talk, you're making this up as you go. But with a lot of practice and high level skill, maybe we can present something like this. We might just say, like everyone else, engineers aren't perfect, but their mistakes tend to be highly visible and attract lots of attention. So if we said something like that, you can see how it easily transitions into an opportunity to list some examples of what these disasters are and why they're happening and so on. So that's the whole point of your opening statement. You won't be able to predict your precise closing statement until it comes time to close off, because you don't yet know what you've said out loud. But I think coming into this CAEL test, at least with a conclusion, is going to help you, or a concluding transition, I mean. So sometimes we might just finish off with to summarize or in closing, or it's very clear that. So have a bit of a transition in mind so that you're able to pull it out and insert it into proper sentence form come test day. I find that helpful. Anyway, let's listen to our test taker here give his answer to this precise question, and we'll see how he does. I will let you know the score that he got, and we'll quickly identify strengths and weaknesses that he's demonstrated across these 5 aspects of the rating checklist. By the way, we will look at the transcript as we listen. The rating team does not have a transcript, remember, but as we're studying, it's more helpful for us as we listen. We can watch or follow along. So I'll play this for you now and we'll see how well he's done here. Oh, he got a band 80. You can see his response score at the very top of the slide. So band 80, meaning he's a very strong speaker. So more about that in just a moment.
So why do engineering disasters happen? Engineering disasters happen, according to this reading passage, because of human errors in general. And I noticed that it goes over a lot of the different problems with many examples, and it breaks down the statistics of engineering disasters into different parts, such as 58% is issued in the design stage and 38% in construction stage and 4% in the operation stage. But I think if you really just take a look at the numbers and see where the source of those numbers are, it really boils down to the fact that human error is the main cause of these engineering disasters. When it comes to the design stage or the construction stage or the operation stage, all of those decisions are okayed by human beings. And just the negligence and the ignorance that are sometimes seen in these examples really highlight to me that no matter what we blame the cause of errors, it really comes down to an oversight on humans. Somehow, I feel like there's a bit of hubris attached to it, in the sense that these are the people making decisions. This is most likely the first mistake that has ever caused such a huge disaster. And it's easy, once you're really settled into a task, to overlook even things that you're very comfortable with doing. So I think carelessness is the number one cause of these errors and disasters. And I noticed that some of the facts that they also bring up is that only a small amount accounts to technology. And I just wanted to spin it back around to the fact that technology, like the fact that we humans developed technology, we should know that it's not ready. That's another point.
Okay, so we already know this is a band 80, which is the second highest score we could achieve in CAEL for a speaking response. So clearly there are some strengths, and I'll point those out. There are still a few weaknesses, though, that we should notice in case this person wanted to continue to build on their skills. So if we start with the delivery skills, all of the speech elements are natural. There are a few long pauses as he's thinking about the next idea. And within this transcript, and you will receive this in your study pack, there's that little ... We've included those ellipses, they're called, throughout the response whenever he pauses. But it wouldn't affect his score tremendously because he pronounces words well. He's got rather comfortable rhythm and intonation and so on. So all of the main elements have been done quite well. There are a few interjections, but they don't interrupt the flow. So all of that's quite strong. If you look at the language now, this is the second part of the checklist. The weakness here, honestly, would be the sentence structure. So we've included here, we've ghosted out the rest of the response, but really highlighted those conjunctions and joining words and transitions. And for the most part, our speaker uses the simple and, but, and so. He uses and quite a bit. There are a handful of other transitions, like when it comes to, or that's another point. Once again, they're fairly simplistic. So this might be one area that the speaker would want to work on just a bit to try to offer more variety with a slightly higher level approach. But overall, I mean, look at his individual vocabulary words. The phrases in green represent his most academic and precise language. So breaks down the statistics, boils down to the fact, negligence, and so on. Spin it around too. So clearly, our speaker does have a strong command on the academic tone or academic register. Be that as it may, there are lots of strengths here, but those dark or bolded words that are underlined are a little bit too common and sometimes borderline slang. The word okayed, for instance, is really casual and does not convey quite the right academic tone. The words huge or small amount, those are really common words. And just with a little bit more foresight, hopefully we could replace those words with a more academic one. So rather than say huge disaster, we might just say significant disaster. It's just making little tweaks and adjustments like this that is going to help bolster the language. But again, overall, there are many more strengths and weaknesses. And his sentence structure, too, does show a good variety. Lots of strengths to comment on. The content alone, he does, first of all, focus the topic. He reads the question right from the computer screen, which honestly is not ideal. He says, so why do engineering disasters happen? And then he goes into his answer. It might have been better to use his own language, but at least we know precisely the topic. He does introduce in general terms about human error. And then here in blue, you can see that he does have quite a few main ideas with the supporting details between. So human error, he identifies as the main cause. He also discusses hubris and carelessness and also technology. So nice job there. Notice he's pulling out main ideas right from the passage. If you have time later, when you look at this transcript in detail, when you're studying on your own, you can see for yourselves that he's used statistics and precise examples also from the reading passage. That's what we want you to do. But he's weaving them together with some of his own ideas. He was the one that introduced hubris. That wasn't really covered in the passage. So feel free to add in some of your own thoughts to support your points, provided you have still addressed the reading passage entirely. And from a task fulfillment standpoint, he does speak for almost 2 minutes exactly. This one came in at 1 minute 58 seconds. So a very strong time response there. He answers the question fully too. So task fulfillment has been done quite well. So these are all reasons why he would achieve a band 80. So just to wrap up what we were talking about, we call this integrated speaking because we are speaking about the long reading. And you're not expected to have your own background knowledge. You don't have to use your own ideas like he did to a point, but you can simply build your response using all the details from that long reading. Just rephrase the words so that you're using your own vocabulary. Try to be specific and also academic in tone. And we want to speak for that 2-minute time. So we want to have enough ideas and examples to cover that time. The prep time as a review should be used to first read the question, understand exactly what you're talking about, and pull out the details right from the passage. Skim reading that passage over again and facing the passage on the screen to your eyes when you're talking is also going to help. A lot of people like to take some quick notes, and that's what I would recommend. Try this at least when you're studying and see if it works for you. When you've got your note paper in front of you in the computer room, you're going to be a little bit more focused and on topic, I think. Then try to think of how you'll open if you have time. If you get stuck, or let's say you finish your answer 20 seconds early, you're going to have to look at the reading passage right on screen and pull out an idea on the spot quickly. Whatever you do, please keep your speech moving forward and never give up. Never just sit back quietly. Always give the rating team something to assess. And we'll finish here. I won't go into this chart as in a lot of detail, as you will receive this in your study pack as well. But I just wanted to close off today with everyone understanding the distinct differences between daily English, so how we communicate with friends in the real world, let's just say, versus academic English that you will be using on the CAEL test. So in day-to-day communications, we're not so focused on backing up our ideas with evidence or using high-level precise language, right? But on the academic test for CAEL, you always want to make sure that you're organizing your answers with a clear opening or beginning. The topic needs to be firmly established. Every single reason or main point you make should be supported with evidence and precise details taken right out of the source material. So that's a major difference between day-to-day style and an academic style. The sentences and grammar structures we use academically too are higher level, as you've seen evidenced here. So it's just a good reminder of making sure we're adopting that academic register as we speak. And last but not least, I will remind you of that little promotion I introduced to you at the beginning of today's session. So when you do register for your CAEL test, please use that code cael25 and you'll receive 25% off the cost of the registration for the test. And also it's about a $400 package you'll get free. So a variety of study materials from the online bookstore will be included for free so that you can continue to study at your leisure at home. This is a list of all of our free webinars, and we've just completed CAEL 202. That would be the third one down from the top, but we do have the other webinars that you might want to go back to our website, cael.ca/webinars. You can register for these on the dates and time that they're listed there in the schedule, and they're free to attend, but we simply need to send you the Zoom link, just like we did for today's session. So please feel free to come back for any other sessions that you find helpful. And access our YouTube channel. The name of the channel is at the bottom here in red. It's called CAEL Official. We've got several different study series there and recorded episodes, but there are a few series I'll point out. So CAEL Live was done a little while ago now. There are several episodes there with guest speakers you might want to check out. And the CAEL Prep with Brandy series as well. That's actually my series. I'm Brandy, the one in the green shirt there. And it's my colleague Ashwati in the black shirt that's pointing at me. We recorded these episodes that guide you through the different skills. So reading, speaking, listening, and writing with different practice test questions. And they're all recorded, free to access. They are around 20 minutes, maybe anywhere from, I'd say, 15 to 25 minutes at most. So they're sort of bite-sized ways to study that gives you more free access to supporting or practice questions. And there are 2 free sample tests right on the website. Please access those and complete them before you do the real one. And you can download the study guide there for free as well. We do sell additional products, and you see the costs here listed for each one. So really quickly, I'll mention again, 2 free sample tests, a free study guide you can download. There are 11 practice tests for sale in the online bookstore. So if you bundle the practice tests together when you purchase them, you'll save a little bit of money per test in the long run, or you can buy them individually if you wish. So if 2 free practice tests aren't enough, again, take advantage of that. The Accelerate program is an online course that you can take at your own pace, and you'll watch the instructional videos and complete the activities. The Practice Test Plus also gives you lots of language building activities, and it's focused around a complete CAEL practice test, start to finish. This is the textbook series, CAEL Focus. Lots and lots of interactive PDFs, etc. Lots of lessons, examples, answer keys, and so on. So you'll have access to skill building activities for all parts of the test. And last but not least, there's a small vocabulary builder that some people enjoy reading through. I say just read every day. If you can read even a newspaper article each day, you're certainly going to have access to a lot of these academic words and phrases that are helpful to note. Anyway, I'll leave you with this. We do have our email address at the top. It's our customer service line. So if you've got questions, especially about test registrations and products, they would be great to reach out to. And our homepage is listed for you on the right-hand side up top, as well as the online store link too. Our 5 social media channels here do have free content for you to access. So when you've got time, you can browse through the channels, especially YouTube. That's where you'll find one master copy recorded version of each free webinar that we deliver. There's an updated playlist there as of 2025, so that would be a good place to start. And again, those prep series are available there too. So I thank you so much for joining us today. I don't see any other questions in the Zoom chat, so we'll leave it there for the day. Hopefully you leave today with some helpful strategies for both reading and speaking. And I wish you good luck on the rest of your study preparation for CAEL. Maybe I'll see you at the next webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.